Hey, this is Tyler from Enigma Pictures, and today I'm going to show you how to do an HDR time-lapse with the Canon 6D. Now, you can translate everything that I show you in this video over to doing a normal time-lapse with any other camera. You can even do an HDR time-lapse with any other camera, but the nice thing about the 6D and the 5D and any other camera that automatically stitches together HDR footage is that you wouldn't have to go frame by frame, or in post you wouldn't have to go through and combine the different exposures into HDR footages. The camera automatically stitches them together. So here we go. So here we have the 6D, and today I'm going to show you how to set up HDR. So you want to be on aperture priority, and that's because if the lighting is going to change at all, you want the camera to compensate without changing the depth of field of focus or anything. So it'll change the shutter speed to adjust for the light, and that way you'll have perfectly exposed images every time. And then you want to go into menu and go all the way over until you see HDR mode, and you want to put it here is the stop difference. I usually go with 3 because you'll see the most dynamic range there, and then you want to have it on every shot. And if you're going to have it on a tripod, which I highly suggest if you're doing a time lapse, then you want to disable the auto align. Now that's pretty much all you have to do on the camera, and then every time you take a picture, it'll take 3 pictures and automatically stitch them together. It does take a little bit longer because it needs to stitch them together, so your interval for the time lapse is going to have to be a little bit longer, but I think it's really worth it. As you can see in the test images, it gives you so much dynamic range. It's just awesome. A few tips for HDR time lapses specifically, or just one really thing to look out for, is if you're gonna have any moving objects in your time lapse, you're going to get some ghosting. And what that is if they take one of the pictures and there's an object there, and then the object moves, you're gonna have some ghosting. Let me try and find an example. Okay, here's an example. So the car was there for the first one, and it's slightly opaque, and then for the second one it was there, and you can see that it's still there. Now with the time lapse, that's not a huge deal, but it will make it a little bit choppier. So a few tips for general time lapses are, you want to have as long of a shutter speed as you can, because if you have blurry images, then it'll flow better. If you have really crisp images, it'll be a little choppy. You want to have it on aperture priority so that if the lighting changes, you don't have anything to worry about as far as exposure, and you don't have anything to worry about as far as focus. Framing is key. You want to get framing down right away. A lot of people don't think about framing, they just want to set up, but you're going to be halfway through it and wish that you spend more time on framing and wish that you framed it perfectly, because time lapses take a really long time. You definitely want it on a tripod because it's going to be shifty, and a lot of times, even if you do have it on a tripod, you want to put warp stabilizer on it. And the last thing is, if you have any kind of remote or anything, any way that you can push the shutter without actually touching the camera, I would suggest doing that, because every time you touch the camera, you move it just a little bit, and you're going to see that shutter, that shaking. So let's get started in here. I'm just going to ignore all these folders. So the thing about time lapses is, especially if you're going to do any digital zooming or anything, you probably want to shoot it at a pretty large dimension, and I mean, it's way larger than video, so a lot of the computers, when you actually pull it in as a video file, aren't gonna know how to handle it. For example, these images are almost 4K. Oh wow, no, they're almost 6K. They're just 500 pixels off of 6K. So that's a huge file. So you have to take it really slow. Don't make the computer try and do too much, or else it'll crash. So to import a quick time lapse, you go in here and you want to have all the pictures in order. You can't delete any, or else it'll screw everything up. So let's go with the wide sunset. You find the first picture and just say image sequence and import. So here we have it. it automatically imports at 30 frames per second, and if you want to change that, see, my computer's already running slow. If you want to change that, you have to go into Clip, Modify, Interpret Footage, and here's what it is at, and I shot all of this planning for 24 frames per second, and that way you don't have to spend as much time out there, but you can always change it, and then hit OK, and see, my clip's now longer because there are less frames. So, I'm going to make a new sequence, and call it HDR, and then I'm going to pull this in. Keep existing settings. This is very important because if you say change settings, then it will make a huge sequence. So keep existing settings, and then we're going to come in here and we're going to scale it down. I think 35.5 was what I had it at. So, and then you can drag it around and you can zoom in and stuff if you want to. But I mean, that's all you really have to do. Now at this point I would suggest rendering that out. So hit enter, render it out. If you're going to keep it like that. If you want to put warp stabilizer on it, warp stabilizer will not work if you've scaled anything, so you would have to, in that case, nest the layer so that now this sequence is 1920 by 1080, but what if you go in here, this file is still 35%. So if you go back to the original, this is at 100%. And then you can put warp stabilizer on that. And then any color correcting I would suggest doing on this layer. Just keep everything separate. I just want to keep emphasizing the importance of rendering everything as you go. I'm not going to go through all my clips, but I'll show you what my project looked like when I was finished. In here, so I had my main comp, which was this, and then all my videos, my 4 time lapses, and then my 4 nested sequences. So if I open samples, here we have my nifty audio track that has to go with every time lapse. Here we have the warp stabilizer nested sequence, and then if you click on that, this is the huge file, which is 35.5% scale, and here's my color correction, and that isn't as important to render out, but oh, well, yeah. So this is everything, and here's a look at what I finished my project. If you have any questions, comment below, find me on Facebook, subscribe. Thanks for watching.